I never suspected a thing. That's probably the part that hurts the most. After 8 years of marriage, 2 children, and what I thought was a normal, stable life in the suburbs, I really believed I knew my husband. But I didn't. Not even close. We moved into that house 5 years ago. Quiet street, friendly neighbors, a small town feel that felt safe, normal, predictable. That's what I wanted. After all the chaos I went through in my childhood, I craved peace, and I thought I'd found it. My husband, Mark, worked in IT. He had a remote job, always on his laptop, always fixing something or in virtual meetings. He was helpful around the house, good with the kids. He even brought me flowers once a month, like clockwork. I bragged about that to my friends. He's not perfect, I'd say, laughing, but he remembers the little things. I didn't know those little things were just part of the performance. The first time I noticed something strange, it was barely a blip. Mark came home late, like really late, and said he got caught up at work helping a coworker whose system crashed. He even showed me texts. It made sense. It always made sense. But then, 2 weeks later, my youngest son, Nathan, 4 years old, pointed across the street and said, "Daddy's over there." We were on the porch. It was Saturday. Mark was inside, supposedly taking a nap. And Nathan, you know how kids just say things, pointed to the beige house across the street, the one with the red front door, and said it again. "Daddy's there. He waved at me yesterday." I laughed. I really did. "No, sweetie," I told him. "Daddy's inside." But my stomach felt cold for just a second. That night, I didn't mention what Nathan had said. It felt silly, but a seed had been planted. And once doubt takes root, it grows in silence. The next week, I started watching the house across the street. Not obsessively, not at first. Just casual glances while drinking my morning coffee or when I was outside watering the plants. The house had always seemed kind of private, curtains always drawn, no decorations, no visible life. But now I noticed things I hadn't before. There was a black SUV that parked in the driveway every other evening, the same make and model as Mark's. But I told myself that was just a coincidence. Still, the pattern was strange. It would arrive at odd hours, never the same time, never parked long. One afternoon, as I took out the trash, I saw someone closing the front door across the street. I couldn't see their face, just a hand and a quick motion. But something about the movement. It was so familiar. Mark always had this way of closing doors softly, like he didn't want to disturb anyone. And that's exactly how that door shut. I felt ridiculous. I told myself I was projecting. But when I brought it up casually to Mark later that night, asking if he knew who lived there, he shrugged and said, "No idea. I think they're new." That was a lie. The Johnsons had lived there before. A retired couple. They moved to Florida 6 months earlier. I remembered the moving truck. I remembered waving goodbye. So whoever lived there now, wasn't that new? About a week later, I was outside walking our dog when I noticed a child's toy lying in the grass across the street, a small blue dinosaur. It was the same kind Nathan had. In fact, we had lost one just like it. Identical. I hesitated. Crossing the street felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I was ready for. But I walked over. I picked up the toy and turned it over. Sure enough, it had Nathan's name written on the bottom in faded Sharpie. It was ours. My heart slammed in my chest. My throat dried instantly. I went back inside without saying a word. I waited until Mark got home from the grocery store and confronted him. "Did you ever drop off one of Nathan's toys across the street?" He looked confused, then annoyed. "Absolutely not! Why would I do that?" I told him what I found. He shrugged and said, "Maybe one of the kids lost it while playing. Maybe it rolled across the street." He was calm, almost too calm. But we both knew Nathan hadn't played outside all week. He'd been sick, inside the house. The toy had disappeared days before that. Still, I dropped it. I told myself it was an impossible coincidence, because the alternative was unthinkable. But then, that Friday afternoon, I saw her, a woman, Early 30s, brunette, stepping out of the front door of the beige house. She looked ordinary, like someone I might talk to at the park. She was holding a toddler on her hip, and beside her, walking, laughing, was Mark, my husband. I froze. My first thought, there must be some mistake. It couldn't be him. Maybe it was someone who just looked like him. But then he turned his head, smiled at the woman, and my heart sank. He leaned in and kissed the toddler on the forehead. It was him. I ducked behind the curtain so fast I almost tripped. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow. This wasn't a theory anymore. This wasn't a wild thought planted by a child's comment. This was real. I stayed by the window, peeking through the edge of the curtain. He didn't stay long. Maybe 10 minutes. He handed the woman something, kissed the kid again, and walked back across the street. When he came into our house minutes later, I pretended everything was normal. He kissed me on the cheek like always, asked about dinner, talked about how traffic was horrible, even though he worked from home. He was lying to my face, effortlessly. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind played every interaction we'd ever had, every late night, every phone call he took in the garage, every vague excuse. It all made sense now. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. He said he was going to pick up a package at the post office. I waited 5 minutes, grabbed my keys, and trailed him from a distance. But he didn't go to the post office. He drove 2 blocks, parked near the beige house, and went inside, this time with groceries in his hand. He was there for almost 2 hours. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know more. I needed proof, not just for myself, but for what would come next. If he was living a double life, I had to be smart. I had to be ready. So for the first time in my life, I became someone I never thought I'd be. A spy. I started tracking his movements. I checked phone records. I watched his patterns. And what I found shocked me even more than I was prepared for. He spent nearly every Tuesday and Friday afternoon running errands. On those days, he was at her house, across the street. Sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes for hours. Every single time, he came home acting the same, calm, casual, pretending like nothing had happened. I began taking photos, videos. I documented the license plate of the black SUV. I even recorded one of the times he walked out of her house and kissed her on the cheek. But what truly broke me wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the lies. It was what I discovered one Thursday morning while watching from my car. She came out holding a baby, maybe 5 or 6 months old. She placed the child in a stroller and walked down the sidewalk. As she passed my car, the baby turned its head. And I swear to you, my knees went weak, because that baby had Mark's eyes. Parte 6. Confronto sem grito. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply sat at the kitchen table, staring at a printed photo of the baby with Mark's eyes, and waited for him to come home. He walked in like always, kissed me, asked what was for dinner. I slid the photo across the table. He stared at it for a few seconds, blinked twice, and then, "Where did you get this?" His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't afraid. It was tired. I didn't answer. "So," he said, sitting down slowly, "you know." "I know some of it," I replied. "I know you go there. I know you've been lying. I know you have a child." He ran his hands down his face, and then, for the first time in our entire marriage, Mark began to cry. "It started before we moved here," he said. "I was seeing her before you even got pregnant with Nathan. I didn't mean for it to become this. But when she got pregnant too, I didn't know what to do." I was silent. He continued, "I thought I could keep it separate. 2 homes, 2 families. I thought I could control it." "Across the street?" I whispered. "You built your second life across the street." He looked ashamed. He didn't try to defend it. It was close. I could be there for both. That's why we moved here. I chose this street because she already lived here. That sentence broke something inside me. The days that followed were a blur. Mark moved into the guest room. We didn't tell the kids anything. Just that Daddy's working late or he's tired. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were a storm of betrayal, guilt, confusion, and, strangely, numbness. But one thing became crystal clear. He had been planning this life. We didn't randomly buy this house. We didn't just happen to move across the street from her. He orchestrated it. I found emails, old ones, from 3 years ago. Mark and the woman, her name was Caitlin, talking about making things easier and how the kids can grow up close. The kids, plural. They wanted both sets of children to grow up near each other, like cousins, like neighbors, like strangers who shared the same father. It was twisted, calculated. But then something happened I didn't expect. Caitlin came to my door. I'll never forget her face, pale, terrified, holding her child close. She said Mark had stopped coming over, that he was ignoring her calls, that she was scared. She didn't know I knew. She just thought he ghosted her. And that's when the final, disgusting truth came out. He told me you died. I blinked. What? He said his wife had passed away. He told me he was a widower. That's why he was so available. I couldn't breathe. I stood there, stunned. Caitlin, the woman I had spent weeks despising. She wasn't the villain I'd imagined. She was a victim, just like me. She had no idea she was the other woman. She believed she was his only one, that I was dead. She even showed me a photo of Mark at her baby shower, standing proudly behind her, holding her belly like it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt sick. I asked her to leave, not out of anger, but because my brain couldn't process anymore. When Mark came home that night, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "She came by. She knows." He sat down slowly, quiet. No excuses, no explanations this time. Just silence. I asked him one question. "Who are you?" He looked at me, tears forming in his eyes, and said something I'll never forget. "I don't know anymore." The next day, I called a lawyer. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I protected my kids. I gathered my evidence. I made copies of everything. I was done being manipulated. But here's the part I didn't expect. Nathan, my little boy. A week after Mark moved out, he asked me a question that shattered me more than any of the lies had. "Mommy, can I still play with the boy across the street?" I blinked. "What boy?" "My friend, the one who looks like me." I realized then they had already met. I watched Nathan through the window that weekend. He stood across the street with a toy in his hand, holding it out shyly to another little boy. The baby I had seen in Caitlin's arms, now walking, now laughing. They played for almost an hour. No fighting, no confusion. Just two children, connected by blood, unaware of everything swirling around them. I couldn't stop crying because in that moment I realized they were innocent. Both of them. They didn't ask for this. They didn't deserve to live with the weight of one man's betrayal. Caitlin and I began to talk. It wasn't easy. At first, it was stiff, filled with pauses and glances that lasted too long. But slowly, we shared stories, dates, details. We mapped out the timeline of his lies, like detectives reconstructing a crime scene. And something strange happened. We started healing, together. He tried to come back, of course. He wrote letters, emails, voice messages saying he'd lost himself and wanted to rebuild. But neither of us replied, because sometimes a person doesn't deserve another chance. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is close the door and lock it. We made an agreement. Our kids could play. They'd grow up knowing some truth when they were ready, but not the full story. Not yet. They didn't need to know who broke the world before they even knew how it worked. It's been 14 months since Mark left. Caitlin and I still live across the street from one another. Our kids still play together, now calling each other best friends. And strangely, we've become something like family. Not by blood, not by love, but by survival. Some days, I still feel the sting of betrayal. I still wake up and wonder how I could have missed all the signs. But then, something happened last week that shook me again. I was cleaning the attic when I found an old notebook, one of Mark's. At first, I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the best of me. Inside, I found pages of handwritten thoughts, some messy, some angry, some filled with regret. And on the very last page, just 2 weeks before I confronted him, he wrote this: "I think they know. I see it in Nathan's eyes. He's only 4, but he sees everything. I'm the monster hiding in plain sight. I built 2 homes and now I'm losing both. I love them, all of them, but I deserve to end alone." I sat there for a long time, not crying, just breathing. Because even monsters feel something. Even liars leave behind pieces of truth. And that's what Silent Confessionals is about. Not just the betrayal, not just the secrets, but the silence in between, where the real story lives. This was Silent Confessionals. If this story touched you, disturbed you, or stayed with you, don't leave in silence. Subscribe, comment, share. We release new confessions every week because someone out there is still hiding the truth.